Hey, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome back to Springboard at Home. This is our 13th episode. Today is August 6th, 2020 for those watching, or for those not watching live, and continuing from the theme last week, we have a mix of different types of businesses represented by our two leaders on the chat today. This week we have Michael Kulp. He is the president and CEO of KBP Investments. We have Rusty Amarante. He's the president of BELFOR Franchise Group, and we're incredibly grateful for their time, for their leadership, and we'll be bringing them into the discussion here momentarily. Last week we had a kind of a similar mix of folks on, some great leaders, and we had Mary Kennedy as one of our guests, and she shared a life lesson that resonated well with a lot of people. She said, she talked about a lesson that she learned from her dad that she called whistling in the dark. Her dad was a three-time combat veteran. And years ago, she was sharing that he taught her a lesson on what he called leading through fear. This was years ago, but also leading through times of uncertainty, which is certainly where we're at today. But highly encourage you to go back, listen to last week's episode. You can find that particular section in the 19-minute mark of last week's episode or last week's stream or whatever we're calling it. But that's available as always on Franchisors.com. So be sure to leverage that amazing content. And we're also grateful, as I mentioned before, for the leaders on the call today. But housekeeping items before we jump in very quickly at the top of the house here. I'll kick it over to Tony, Brad, and Lane.
Well, Ryan, we got to make sure Tony might be whistling in the dark right now because her house has no electricity because of the hurricane.
That's true. Tony, how are you holding up over there in the New Jersey heat or Philadelphia or wherever the heck you're at?
New Jersey. It is very hot. Our internal temperature was like 92 yesterday, so it is very hot. But I will quickly let you know about Switchboard. It is our employment resource on my background. That is also on Franchisors.com, where you can upload your resume. You can post a job posting, and you can also search our database, which has over 125 resumes. So if you have any questions navigating the site, please reach out to me. I will type my email in the chat box. So if you need help posting a job, I can help you through it and do it for you. So please just let me know, and thank you so much.
Tony, we're actually very grateful that you plugged the extension cord into the computer to be able to sign on with us today. I'm sure whatever other things and space air conditioners you had are standing. Yeah, but we appreciate you and thank you. Philadelphia is, and this area has been very unpredictable. In a land of very recently unpredictables, it sort of became the tornado alley over the last 24 hours. We've never had. Yesterday, the report is we were the land of runaway barges on the Delaware River, which has no barges, but one somehow broke loose from a construction site and took out the main artery to get into Philly. The other two arteries, the drives, were taken out by the storm yesterday. So Philly has zero, in terms of our west side of the city, arteries to enter the city that are not driving down regular, 63rd Street all the way down into the city. So it's been crazy. I'll just say one word about Springboard while I have everybody. So Springboard is interactive. It'll be on those dates. We'll publish more definitive information and a schedule shortly. But I'm going to promise you what we promised you in the past in terms of Springboard, an interactive and experiential event that will not be like any other events that we think that you have an opportunity to participate in virtually. We have the smartest, brightest minds in the business putting together the exercises, and there'll be a lot to offer. So it will be a resource for individual problem solving and having your own matters dealt with, not just watching a series of talking heads. So stay tuned for that. Brad, what do you have?
Well, number one, I really want to thank Rusty and Mike for joining us today. And as we're pivoting now, as Lane kind of mentioned, Springboard, we are really trying to make it interesting. From what I've heard now, pretty much every other franchise conference has been is canceled for the season that's not virtual. So there's going to be no in person. So we're going to try to have to get very creative But the most important thing is for franchisors and franchisees to get great information. And, we're lucky to have people like Rusty and Michael joining us today, as they're going to give the advice. And we're hoping to bring, everybody together to kind of work together. And, as we make it through this end of the year, and hopefully the vaccine is getting sooner and sooner and sooner. But at this point, none of us will be traveling to at least the first of the year on any business type of conferences. So we're going to do our best to bring you some really great information. With that, we'll turn it over to Ryan. And like I said, let's get to it.
Yeah, let's get to it. Formal introduction really quick. Michael Kulp, he operates over 750. Michael, you can correct me with the exact number here in a second. But 750 KFCs and Taco Bell locations across the states, many states. He's an incredible operator, extremely savvy at marketing and all things, everything, but we're grateful for his time. We also have Rusty Amarante. He's a seasoned franchise veteran, president of BELFOR Franchise Group, which some brands, Kim Dry, 1-800 Water Damage, Delta Disaster Restoration, most recently the Patch Boys, and many others. But gentlemen, thank you so much for the time, and welcome to Springboard at Home.
Thanks.
So let's kick it off.
Thanks for having us.
With some background and context. I think I'm getting feedback here. Maybe my internet's delayed. But Michael, we'll start with you. Tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into franchising.
Yeah, thanks, Rusty. So I have one of those pretty atypical backdrops in terms of how I got into this business and how long I've been in it, and pretty unstrategic start. I started working in the restaurant business when I was 14 years old, and for no other reason than that nobody else was probably silly enough to hire a 14-year-old boy into any other industry other than the food business, and never left it. Swore I'd never stay in it, and here I am. Worked all the way through high school, through college, and post-college in this business, and had an opportunity to join an amazing organization, which was the second one post-college that I joined. Individual and his father, who I joined and worked with for ended up being over a decade before I had an opportunity to jump into ownership of my own. And we've had a tremendous run. We've done over 70 acquisitions, built a lot of restaurants. Today we have, over 45 members of our management team who have meaningful equity stakes, and are fortunate to have a fantastic financial partner that hopefully will continue to facilitate our growth. But pretty non-traditional background in the sense that we really kind of built this thing from some haystacks and lots of hard work. And I think it's probably one of the things that makes franchising so special is the way you can get into this business and really, lean on some mentors and a lot of people who are willing to help you and grow a pretty special business that we have today from a pretty non-traditional background.
Thank you for that, Michael. And you've certainly done a very impressive thing, and you have a whole farm instead of just some haystacks. But Rusty, what about you? Tell us about yourself and how did you get into franchising?
Yeah, kind of a little bit similar, I guess. After my first year of college, I took a part-time job in the summer with a guy who had a restoration franchise. Going back that far in history, nobody really even knew what his restoration was, but for whatever reason, I really liked it. I was very attracted to it. I knew when I graduated college, I wanted to have my own business. So my head was entrepreneur, and long story short, I did not finish college. I ended up buying a franchise of my own. And next thing I knew, I was a young guy in the restoration business and out franchising. That franchise actually eventually got sold and then resold, and the franchise did not stay together, and I became an independent contractor. And after about 20 years of doing that, I sold it to Sheldon Yellen, the CEO of BELFOR Property Restoration. And I've now been with BELFOR for about another 20 years. So I've been doing this for a long time. And about 12 years ago, BELFOR got into the franchising business. And it's been a great ride. It's been a great experience. experience, and we've built a very, very nice business that we're very proud of. So that's the quick background on it.
Beautiful. Yeah, one of the themes that I've recognized and experienced throughout the last 4.5 months with this pandemic is I couldn't imagine being, you know, you mentioned with the contractor and kind of doing your own thing. I couldn't imagine being in business by myself at this time. The franchise community has really come together. Franchisors helping franchisees, and it's been pretty incredible to see. I'd hate to be in business by myself, but as just for the context for the audience, tell us what it looks like, Michael, today with respect to units. We mentioned your brands, but you're largely open. But what does the units operating look like for you both, starting with Michael?
Yeah, we've been very fortunate. You know, we had probably a similar dip in business when COVID first hit to what most retail businesses and establishments saw. We saw a sharp decline in revenue and even sharper in traffic. You know, we were fortunate that we had a drive-through operation that allowed for, you know, convenient and contactless offerings of our product to our consumer. And so I think as the world began to shut down a bit, we were uniquely positioned to stay pretty vibrant in terms of our revenue streams. And so today, all but 3 of our locations are no dine-in. We're operating on a drive-through only model. Our delivery and carry-out business is thriving. You know, you can still come inside for product, but it's takeout only. That's, you know, a lot of that's delivery business is what you're seeing from a traffic perspective. The few units that we do have open are pretty unique facilities that have abnormally large dining rooms, and they're a bit of either nostalgic or what we would consider hero assets, totally different than what you would typically see in a traditional QSR location. But for the most part, border to border for us in our footprint, which is about 27 states on the eastern half of the country, we're operating and open and you know, cranking more cars through our drive-through than we ever have in a pretty busy business. Obviously, in the context of the food business in general and even retail in general, pretty lucky to be in the place we're in.
Yeah. Rusty, what about you? The mix of your brands and units open, a quick thumbnail on that for context, and then we'll dive into some other juicy topics.
Yeah, you know, us too, we're very fortunate, and as bizarre as this is, right? Our mothership, BELFOR, is the largest property restoration company in the world. So we are very used to dealing with viruses and mold and infection and, you know, fire, smoke, storm. We're used to quick response and changing direction, the business that we're in. And our franchise businesses, for the most part, funnel up into BELFOR in one or another within of Hoods, which is an exhaust cleaning franchise. So, you know, there was obviously a big shift in what our location, our ChemDry carpet cleaning guys, for example, you know, all of a sudden became people who were spraying disinfectant. Same thing, duct cleaning became very important because indoor air quality was such an issue. You know, our cabinet refinishing business actually took a little bit of a dive, but interestingly enough, it's spiked now more than ever because people spent so much time in their home. They've not spent money to go on vacation. They're not traveling or whatever. So now they want to invest in their home. And one of the places they want to typically invest is the kitchen. So we have a big backlog there. Our hood cleaning business is you know, back and strong as it was before, and they too have a big backlog. So yeah, you know, certainly a very, very time and a lot of unknowns and a lot of you know, very uncomfortable emotions, right? Because there was so much we just didn't know, but we got ourselves through it, and we're very strong right now.
Yeah, Lane, now you know that you can get your cabinets redone, so you could go ahead and plan on that. Want to make a note to the audience before we jump into some of the topics here. Use the chat box and submit questions if you have any. We'll do our best to filter through those. But Michael, I want to ask you first, as you reflect back, looking over the last 4.5 months, how have you navigated the waters? Crazy time, but what are some of the top things that you focused on, and how have you kind of looked at this whole thing and navigated?
Yeah, well, that's a big subject. I think if I think about taking it in sort of two chunks, Ryan, we obviously had the internal employee function that was a big part of our focus, and then there was more the consumer and all of the challenges associated with the consumer that we looked at, in a lot of different ways. Also, I'll sort of take the internal view first. I think there were a lot of obvious steps that employers had to take immediately that most people, whether it was quick or whether they were fast followers on these fronts, had to take. So, whether it was immediately ensuring that you had all the protective equipment available to you, and getting first your employees comfortable with the fact that nothing was going to be more important to them than their safety. We tried to do that in a way that wasn't a fast follower, but to ensure that everybody truly, through our actions and how we spent our money, knew exactly where our heads and our hearts were in terms of making sure we prioritized our internal employees first. And I think the way we communicated that, which was very authentic, and it came at a pace and with regularity from our leaders, going much deeper into the organization and looking, even though it was through screens like this, into the eyes of the people across our business and telling them, guys, we're not going to make short-term decisions that may be best for the revenue cycles in this business, but not best for you. And here's the steps we're taking immediately. And as soon as those change, you'll hear back from us in terms of how we're going to make them. And we did that with a cadence we had not done historically in terms of both who and how we were communicating, all the way through to how we were engaging our internal charity to ensure people knew they would not have disruption in their pay, that to the extent any incentive opportunities for earnings were disrupted, we would be there to make sure those were whole. We wanted to be sure people knew, we understood they were working in really challenging environments. And so whether it was financially or emotionally, we were going to be there to ensure that we were supportive with our actions, our wallets, et cetera, without exception. The flip side of that, from a consumer perspective, was much more complex. We had, daily and weekly decisions to be making on a very complex supply chain, on tons of product that was backlogged in terms of, staring down the barrel of a boatload of product that had been purchased and AIPs that had been signed, really complex decisions to make in terms of media that had been placed and millions and millions of dollars worth of marketing decisions that needed to be made, and all types of historical sort of decision-making patterns that all of a sudden meant nothing, right? The way we had looked at marketing and testing and consumer insights and all the things that we'd always known no longer mattered. So, we were in decision-making cycles that felt like they changed 3 times a week and just needed to get pretty good at sort of forgetting about all of our historical biases and really using real-time everything, as well as not being shy to adjust on the fly and be a bit more patient than we'd ever been in terms of feeling like we needed to have the right answers on all of those fronts. So I think that the initial reaction that we felt like we needed to have to our employee actually ended up being the right answer in almost all cases with our consumer also. It was sort of, don't worry about the short-term revenue cycle, worry about safety and security, worry about what they care about most. And from there, once this thing settles a bit, we'll determine what our new world looks like and adjust. So, fast forward to now, we've got a much better handle on both of those two things. And I feel like we're in a better cycle, a stronger decision-making pattern. But Ryan, I'll tell you, initially, we were all learning on the fly how to handle both of those two things. I think the one that felt most natural to us was how to handle the employees and how to handle, those 15,000 people across our business who were just as sort of up in arms with how to react to our current environment. And I'll tell you, I couldn't be more proud of our teams and the way that they handled that, with sort of that authentic and sincere reaction to ensuring the safety of all of our people first. And never once did we have to go course correct people's behavior in terms of wanting to push a revenue cycle ahead of that. So I think that's the one thing I'll tell you we didn't make many mistakes on that I really believe today, looking back on it, is part of the reason we're so far ahead of a lot of the competitive set in terms of where we sit today in our current environment.
Very well said. Very, very well said. And Rusty, I know that you would echo most of that. And so as you reflect back, looking over the past crazy 4.5, 5 months, how have you guys navigated, and what were some of the things that you had to focus on?
Yeah, for sure. And you know, I don't want to be redundant of what Michael said, but absolutely, you know, health and safety was a number one priority. You know, obviously we're a little bit different. We go to the consumer does not come to us. So our whole focus for proper PPE and respiratory equipment and all those kinds of things, masks and gloves, was a big challenge. You know, certainly going back to when all this was unfolding. But we put in place a weekly call with all of our management that was conducted by our CEO, and he made everybody reassured of all the things that we were doing. We too are a very big company, but we really look at ourselves as a big family, and we absolutely take care of each other. We did put a wage freeze in place, you know, wage increase in freeze in place. But we made it very clear that everybody was part of a very financially stable company, and that we were going to do whatever we needed to get through. People coming to work was voluntary. If somebody didn't want to come, they didn't have to. To the best of my knowledge, I'm not aware of anybody who did not work. And that was something that, you know, the executive team took great pride in, because we felt that such a great commitment from people who weren't forced to come to work, but they chose to, and they fought for the company and fought for our employees and our franchisees to help them. So we're very proud of that. Yeah. So, but.
Thank you. So, Mike, you mentioned a bunch of decisions, daily decisions, weekly decisions, historical patterns that were completely rendered irrelevant, and all of that. But as you looked at some of the, and I think you already kind of mentioned it, but as you looked at some of the things that you had to innovate on, what were some of the biggest things that you did have to go innovate on in order to make that a reality, to be able to make those real-time decisions? Were you already equipped to be able to do that, or did you have to innovate there? And then what else did you have to innovate on?
You know, it's a good question. I've asked myself many times if we used to have all the information we're using today and we just didn't, or if all of a sudden this all just showed up and we never had it before. I can tell you we never used it if we had it all. But a couple of examples would be that on a weekly basis right now, we're looking at the intersection of sort of real-time customer data telling us not only how likely are they to, but how frequently have they done things like leave their house to eat, and when and why, with how many people, but then also tracking both cell phone movement and credit card usage across major banking groups to see if they're actually telling us what they're doing. And we're able to see by legislative decision-making areas geographically how that's impacting the intersection of that data to tell us whether or not we should be reacting differently, either by day part, by price point, by demographic, or by COVID impact in terms of either legislative reactions to COVID impact or not, with our marketing spend as one example, right? We never ever behaved that way, you know, prior to this. And so while I'm not sure you would need to, because traffic patterns weren't changing quite as quickly as they are today, or anywhere near as quickly, there's still good learning from that, right? Even if you're not making it on a daily, weekly basis. And, you know, I think there's going to be some things that having to be this nimble and as detailed as we're being right now are going to have taught us, and will probably be still being used at a different either frequency or in different depths than they were prior to this, because I think the level of detail we're looking to for guidance today just feels a little different to me.
That's phenomenal. So what would be your advice to There's probably a lot of people on this call. Everybody on this call would love to be able to look at that type of data and have that type of data. But what would be advice to, emerging franchisor that has 100 units? How would they even go about, and maybe this is even an unfair question because you have teams of people that help you put this in place, but how would people go about leveraging that type of data in their business?
Well, I would venture to guess that whether you're too small to have it on your own, or whether you're not, there's ways to acquire the data, even if it's through aggregating funds through associations, or becoming a part of broader groups of people that can help you to acquire it. So this is JP Morgan Chase data, Bank of America data, other big banks. There's 4 or 5 of them, right? And there's 2 or 3 research companies that most all franchisors that I know of use. And it's then paired with cell phone data that's readily available for purchase. So if it's too expensive for smaller franchisors, I would be figuring out how to collaborate with other smaller franchisors, because the data is relevant to everyone, and it's not it's all anonymized. It's not like you're buying competitive data that you can't share. So I think there's probably ways to do it. You've got to find maybe a distinct way to acquire it. But there's a ton of incremental stuff out there to what I just mentioned that I would suggest is even, look, when we were a business probably a third or a fourth the size of ours today as a franchisee, forget about franchisor, we were acquiring a lot of similar data and buying it from inside organizations that have it readily available for purchase. So, it's probably some combination of educating yourself on what's out there, and then just determining the most efficient path or economically feasible path to getting your arms around it. I think it's available.
Excellent. I know there are a lot of folks out there taking some notes. Rusty, what about you guys? What kind of through all of this, what have you guys been forced to innovate on? I know that you're in a much different business. Some of the businesses had natural built-in demand. Some of them, as you mentioned, pivoted and started offering disinfecting and sanitizing services because they're very kind of closely related to that business, and that's something that every organization needs. But what did you guys have to innovate on?
Well, I think the thing that we innovated on the most, and I'm not sure if innovative is the right word for it, but we know so much more now than we did 4 months ago. So if you're a small business person, a franchisee, to your point earlier, Ryan, if there was ever a great time to be a part of a franchise, it was through all of this, because you weren't out there alone.
Yep.
So I think one of the biggest things that we shifted to is, stop texting, stop emailing, and calling the franchisees, talking to them, and do the best we could to bring some level of comfort. We lie and say, oh, we just know everything will be perfect. Nobody knew, right, what it's going to end up looking like. But we tried to take as much of a positive towards it and into the future. And we made them very comfortable in knowing that we were going to be with them through thick and thin. And I think that generated a very good comfort level during a difficult time for our franchisees, that they weren't just an email away or a text. They were really a person, and we wanted those calls to be ones in groups. And we made a very specific effort to try and bring some level of, we will get through this. I one night on TV, somebody said, when you're going through hell, the thing to do is to just keep going. And that was kind of what we were, hey guys, we family, we're going to keep moving. We will get through this. We will figure it out and fine on the other side. So I think emotionally for a lot of people, that was because obviously if you're the breadwinner for your family and you're uncertain about things, now it's comfort to your family. It's kind of a trickle down thing, and the last thing that your family wants to experience is that. So I think for us, that was a major effort.
Rusty, I have a question. I mean, so both of the brands have made it to people's homes. Michael's not serving on premises, and people, I guess, are taking it home, and you're entering it. I know my family and others around us are very selective about it, and I get that people are in their home wanting to get this stuff done. My question is, has the protocol or etiquette around home service changed? I mean, hey, first of all, you come to work in my house, I'm here. Right? It's not like you're going to call me at home, read me the estimate. I'm going to let you in on my phone, and they're going to unlock my door. I'm here, and I'm watching you, and I can see everything. How has it changed? I mean, I know that people, put varying levels of spacesuits on to come in people's houses and have like incorporated hand washing stations on vehicles that didn't have them. It's just stuff so that everyone around you saw you sanitizing. But how's that been like for your companies?
Well, it was a very big thing, Lane. And you got to think about it, it goes both ways, right? It's not just the customer being concerned about the employee coming into their home, but our employees are concerned of what environment are they going into. So if we just got done saying to you, safety is the most important thing to you, our employees and franchisees, but just rush into anybody's home and do whatever they ask, we really weren't very sincere. So it was a very delicate balance. And for us, obviously having, calling the client before we walked in and they could see us putting on a fresh Tyvek suit and a fresh mask and gloves and booties and things like that. That it's obviously a big extreme from what was going on 6 months ago, right? But at least they felt that was good. We would say to them, hey, we've taken our temperature today and it is normal. We've not had any symptoms. We don't believe we've been exposed to anyone that has had any. But we also called and asked our customers a lot of those same questions. Hey, does anybody currently have COVID? Are anybody running a fever? Is there anybody that we need to make sure is in a different area of the home or a different area of the building? So it was a lot of give and take. And for the most part, it was received very, very well, on both sides. Obviously, you run into somebody once in a while who, thinks they're bulletproof or, doesn't matter to them what somebody's exposed to. For the most part, that was extremely, extremely rare. But yeah, and it's still a practice, not quite to the extreme that it was, but it's still a very big concern.
So both of you have said that it was really the pathway to clearing it for your employees created the optics that you needed for the just optics. I don't mean to suggest it's optics, but the actual, the security and that people felt was created at the employee level. That's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, the last thing somebody would want to see is, somebody just already maybe coming up in a Tyvek suit. Well, how do I know where they were on the job before, right? For us, it's important that we demonstrate that we've got new, clean gear on, and it's been used only one time for this particular project.
Michael, I wonder, and it sounds like the answer might be yes, based on how you described your where you sit today. But going 100% to the drive-through and changing the model, and I'm just telling you my own personal observations from our conversation, I guess our prep call. How did you turn the speed up? It's one thing to turn the conveyor up to just have everything accelerate faster, but I'm sure there are so many systems on the inside, and that the drive-through line will pile up into an interstate or into a freeway, and people will be not polite about blocking the whole freeway to keep their spot. How did you get people to do exactly what they did before, but a whole lot faster and, fairly sweet about it?
Yeah, well, I think, first of all, generally speaking, and this isn't just the case for our business, it's generally the case across almost all of quick service restaurants. Not all, but almost all. Traffic is down. So when you think about generally the fact that most QSRs do quite a bit more business through the drive-through as a percentage of their business than they do inside, and traffic in general is down. The number of cars going through their drive-through is not up substantially. The dollars you're spending when you go through per car is up, which is why you're seeing revenue dollars up. So as a general rule, you're seeing you come a little less frequently, but spending a lot more when you come because you don't want to leave quite as often. The combination of that with the fact that an operation where you're not worried about the front counter and the drive-through is so much less complex, and you've got all of your management oversight on one piece of the business, really provides you the capability to do exactly what you just said, which is just operate that business a little bit more efficiently and effectively. And you pair that with not all that much more incremental traffic, and you can accomplish it. Now, if we were to move back to substantial transaction growth, I think you could start to run into some problems, in particular in the higher volume outlets. But for today, you can make it happen.
Lane, if you were talking, you're on mute. But
how did the percentage change of third-party delivery? Just how greatly did that impact your business in terms of?
It's huge. I mean, it depends what, it's been so sporadic by week and from month 1 to month 3. And, as you've added or taken away aggregators and you name it, but I mean, it's been dramatic. I mean, depending on which brand and what part of the country and all those, we had parts of the country that were up, 400 to 800% in delivery. It's a massive number. And, some brands that were more developed in delivery have seen less, and some that were less developed have seen more, but it's a major shift that I think will stick, not at those levels probably, but I think will be a shift that's here for a while.
A follow-up question that I have on the topic, you mentioned that first and foremost, it was important to communicate the safety and to take care of the employees. But on the topic of retaining and or hiring employees, how has that been? Has it been tough to retain frontline employees? And this question for both, Rusty, we'll start with you and then we'll kick it over to Michael.
Yeah, as I mentioned, for our franchisees, they really have felt the challenge. I know the $600 a week supplement, has now stopped, but we had a lot of franchisees who really did struggle with employees who just were very candid and said, hey, look, I make more money sitting home on the benefits that are available now, and that's what I'm going to do. And, why take the risk of being exposed to COVID in some form or fashion, and why be out there working? I can be here with my family and make more money. So it was fine for the first month or so or whatever, where nobody really knew what was going on. But as business came back online, and certainly over the last month or 6 weeks, where business is really back online, most of our locations have a big backlog that they're struggling to fulfill purely because of the personnel challenges. And that's the pay range that these are in, and you can't all of a sudden double or triple someone's salary to continue to work, because you can't double or triple what you're charging your customers all of a sudden. So it's definitely been a bottleneck, but I'm sure here in time it'll open up.
Mike, what about for you? I know obviously it's been tough, but what does the situation frontline employees look like for you guys? And how do you be the employer of choice? How do you keep the morale up without being able to physically be together? Just speak on that topic for a second.
Yeah. So, we were really fortunate on the subject that Rusty just touched on a second ago in terms of the unemployment situation, because we never had a lull that was big enough to have to remove employees from our workforce, or lay anyone off or furlough people, et cetera. Anyone who left our employment, it was on their own behalf, and we had an opportunity for them. So they weren't able to stay on the sidelines and collect. We did have enough of a shift in the need for just pure numbers in terms of employees because of the closing of our dining rooms and some of our late night and earlier morning hours moving, that there was a decline in total workforce in terms of headcount. But we've been able to maintain a good total workforce. I think if we were out trying to up our numbers substantially right now, it would be very, very, very difficult for us. It might be impossible, just given all the things that Rusty mentioned. So it'll be very interesting, I think, in the couple coming months, depending on what happens, in Washington over the few weeks, and in particular with regard to stimulus packages and such, to do that should we need to. I think to answer your second question, one of the things we're really focused on right now, in particular with our above store leaders in each of our markets, and then as you move your way into our leadership positions, is, we've been in this environment for a while now, and we've got to figure out how to move past feeling like we're operating on more of a short-term, day-to-day basis in some of the things that have always made us, an employer of choice and a unique place to work. And I think what those things look like today are very different. To the point you made, Ryan, we can't, pick our people up and fly our top performers, to beautiful resorts and spend time with them, celebrating them. We can't bring people into the same developmental sessions and surround them with great opportunities to be, immersed in, leadership development the same way we could months ago. And list goes on. We've got to find new ways to engage. I think the two ways we're trying to do that are, one, just, in general regards, we're trying to do it through trying to reframe ways that we can engage with people in morale building contexts. So, are there ways that we can help engage our communities right now during real times of need and help be the conduit for people working in our business to find sort of a great feeling about their employee through our helping them engage with those around us in our communities. So, for example, we sponsored a program called 45 Days of Giving, where we effectively financially sponsored each of our teams all over the country going out and facilitating donations and giving and social work in the communities of their choice, right? But as groups and as teams in a obviously a socially distanced way, to go out and say, listen, we're not the only ones working in challenging environments and feeling the need to kind of relieve ourselves from this stressful situation. But also we realize that, like, we're not having anybody walk in and deliver something that feels good to us every day in our environment anymore either. And we sort of pushed this out as an idea. We didn't know how well it'd be received. And overnight on our social media platforms, this thing just blew up. I mean, we had people doing things and going out and making an impact, whether it was at nursing homes or whether it was at hospitals, whether it was in, their local fire stations, you name it, all over the company at a level that was like, holy hell, what are we going to do with this thing? It's just gone crazy. And it ultimately blew up to a level where a brand picked it up and it became something that we ended up doing nationwide that got picked up and turned out, we ended up donating over 1 million meals and I mean, it just went wildfire, right? And the employees took such pride in it. It was a simple, subtle way for us to engage and help create some pride in the work that was being done, which was all we can really do in times like this, right? So simple stuff like that, all the way through to just reminding our leadership groups right now that the job they used to do is different. And even the depth of detail that they're having to go into in terms of their follow-up, the questions that they're asking, how they're still engaging with the spouses of the people on our team when they can't see them. And, just really simple things that I think you take for granted and forget about when you're doing it over the telephone versus seeing somebody more regularly. We're spending time on all of those. I think the flip side and more tangible side of things is we're really trying to get ourselves back to growth. We're a growth organization. People come here because they want opportunity professionally and personally and financially. And we're trying to put ourselves back into the gas pedal again on growth. And, so far we've been pretty successful building a strong pipeline, but people want to see us moving ourselves back into sort of what we do well, instead of living in this, geez, is this ever going to go away environment? And so I think both in terms of some of the softer, subtle stuff, Rusty, that I mentioned as a couple of examples, and also just trying to move our mindset back to, hey, this is going to look a little different than it used to, but people still came here for the same reason that they came here when they joined this organization, which was to move themselves and their family forward. We're trying to do both of those, maybe a little different than we used to, but get back to both of them.
Very well said. I know there's a lot of people taking notes, and you set a really good frame and context for how you're approaching that and the new reality that we live in. Rusty, one of the things that I wanted to ask you, since you have brands that are now doing sanitization and disinfecting services, do you think that it's important for folks to engage with outside firms? I know there are brands that put in their protocols, their best practices. So should they consider outside groups and in case of emergencies? And just speak a little bit about that, the sanitization kind of from a preventative measure as well.
Well, yeah. So, I think obviously the very first thing is right now, we are getting, as is the rest of the world, inundated with companies who claim to have these products that and actually very easy virus to kill. It's nowhere bad as a norovirus or other things we've dealt with. But you got to make sure that you're buying an EPA approved. You got to make does in fact do what the people that are selling claims that it does. Whether you apply it yourself or you hire a contractor, I think one of those issues is there's two. One is an issue of liability and one is an issue of comfort, right? So I think employees feel a little more if an outside source came in, a professional company, and disinfected the area versus, hey, we just had we just sprayed stuff on the kitchen counters, or here's something for you to spray at your desk or whatever. So I think there's a little greater comfort level that for the employees, when they see signs that this area has been treated and it's been professionally done, I think that's an important thing. I think the other thing too is all indications are we're going to get another wave of this to some degree here in the fall, and potentially again at the first of next year. We all hope and pray nowhere near to the degree that we've experienced, but it's what we're potentially seeing, and it's probably good for especially commercial clients to have a relationship with a contractor who does provide these types of services. So when they call them, they're available and they service them. Because as you can imagine, once everybody decided they wanted to disinfect their buildings, it became overwhelming. So, there was more work than there was, you just couldn't service as many people as you wanted as quickly as they wanted it. And then resources as far as, again, PPE gear and actual disinfectants that in our case that we would authorize, it became more and more of a challenge to obtain. So, it's as silly as it may sound, the last thing we needed during that period of time was a brand new big customer, because our hands were full, dealing with our long-term clients.
Yeah, you mentioned list in. Yeah, one of the pieces of advice that you gave, you said make sure it's list in, registered. Just share where folks can find that. The answer is simple. You could Google search and get a list of list in products. Is there anything else that you'd recommend, or is just simply Googling that?
Yeah, no, Googling it is fine. And, you ask for the material safety data of the product. For any product that you're looking at, and it should show the EP approvals. It'll show the content of it, and it should make some indication whether they've done testing, that verifies that it does in fact kill this virus. So, yeah.
Thank you. We're going to bump up against time. We have 10 minutes left. Michael, one of the things I wanted to ask you is relating to marketing from a messaging perspective, from a strategy perspective. Can you speak to some of the ways that you've approached marketing? You already talked about the data and how you're making some decisions, but tactically, what are some of the things that you've learned and really leaned into from a marketing tactic and strategy perspective?
Yeah, sure. So, earlier I mentioned that we've really been paying close attention to what consumers are telling us about how they're using products when they leave the house. And I think, I don't know this, but I would guess grocery store habits probably look and feel similar to ours if you were to kind of compare normal behavior versus this last couple of months of behavior. So if I just think about our own family's behavior, you know, we're buying things in larger quantities than we typically would because we're going less frequently, right? We were never the toilet paper hoarders, but we might be buying 2 loaves of bread instead of 1, for example, or whatever, right? Our business has looked similar. And so what some of our insights told us early on were not only were families eating together more frequently, but that they wanted to venture out to a restaurant if they were going to go to one less frequently also. So some of those insights led us to a place where not only were the offerings that we were putting together from just a quantity perspective, and I don't mean, you know, a larger taco or burger or whatever. I mean, but the quantity of products such that it could be eaten today and tomorrow, in particular in the chicken business where, you know, the product is pretty good the following day, led us down a path where we started offering meals that were probably 30% more than anything we've marketed in 5 years. And it's a little risky in particular in a scenario where you never want to put yourself from a perception perspective in a poor value place in a segment and category that's driven, you know, largely by value perceptions. And it just absolutely took off. It made a huge impact on our business. And, you know, if you step back and look at our categories broadly, pizza and chicken have been by far the big winners, with the exception of a couple of one-off brands who've also done very well. And I think a big part of that is because of the fact that you can buy in quantity. And so, you know, we didn't just ride the train in terms of, yeah, quantity's winning. We went out and proactively marketed it, which is a bit of a risk, and it's done very, very well for us. So we did that both on kind of the group meal occasion inside of our business and started also to do it on the individual user occasion in our business. And to some extent, both brands, as much as even Taco Bell as an individual user brand, started to market in that same regard a bit. So it's done really well. And, you know, that's one simple example, Ryan, of how we used some of those insights to pivot a little bit. And, you know, we're fortunate that we had offerings that fit that insight and didn't have to go create them.
Hey, Ryan.
Yep.
You know, and, you know, Rusty is a perfect example, you know, with a lot of our listeners talking about the future and the, you know, what's going to happen in 2021. You know, a lot of people saying 2020. You guys made, for instance, an acquisition in the middle of the COVID. So obviously you guys are very comfortable what the future brings to the whole American business. You want to kind of go through that?
You know, actually, you know, we made 4 acquisitions during COVID. Only one was related to the franchise business. But much like Michael said, you know, we're a growth company, and our appetite to continue to acquire franchise brands is as strong as ever. And you know, Sheldon, our CEO, has made it real clear. You know, I want more brands. Go get them. So we are very, very actively pursuing growth, and we're you know, we're keeping our foot on the gas, and we're gonna keep doing it the way we've been doing it. And you know, it may not be the most pleasant thing to say, but you know, during these challenging times, it may be a good opportunity for us to bring in a new company, as well as it is a good opportunity for someone who maybe struggled through this to get, you know, back on solid footing and rebuild and to keep going with what their goal or their dream was as it relates to a franchise business. So yeah, we're in the buying mode. Yeah.
Michael, what about you? What does putting the pedal on the metal look like for you guys? Or are you just focused on executing and weathering the storm, and how are you approaching growth?
Well, I would tell you, you know, so we typically do, you know, I don't know, 3 to 5 acquisitions a year. I think I mentioned early on, we've done 70, I think 1 or 2 acquisitions. And, so, acquisitions are part of our daily lives and something we do a lot. The only interesting thing for us is going to be whether or not the success we're having now makes it difficult in the near term. I think it could potentially have one of two outcomes for us. It's either going to be that people see this as a good time for them to exit, not knowing, if 2021 is going to bring some macroeconomic uncertainty of some kind, or the flip side, which is that, they don't want to exit because they want to ride the coattails of some, being the only sort of category that really weathered well, thinking that valuations may be driven upward. I think either way, we'll still find growth through this period. I think it'll just be a matter of whether or not it's a little slower and steadier, or whether it's kind of some of what Rusty was suggesting, in the sense that this may be a really strong time for us to be, a potentially more aggressive acquirer in terms of the next 12 to 18 months. But I'm pretty bullish about our categories' strength through this in general terms. Forget about brands or any of that. It's proven now through really kind of 9/11 and through this that it's a good space to be in terms of restaurants and in food in general. So I think from our perspectives, we plan to continue to go after continuing growth.
Lane, as we have 2.5 minutes left, I'll let you ask the last question if you want to go for it. Lane?
Sorry, I'm good at unmuting. You might have touched on it a little earlier. I think that a lot of folks, your reference to whistling in the dark is something we've laughed and talked about before, because I don't think anybody really has any answers. And I think that people have talked about communication, how important that was. But any other advice for folks in either your industries or outside of your industries that are emerging and may not have your resources? I know, Michael, you shared how they might put together that cellular data with other things. And so I'm not asking you to repeat what you've already said, but if there's other advice, I think that the advice column has been the most robust here in terms of what's been usable and what people repeat after us and call us out after. So maybe, Michael, maybe you first.
Sure. I mean, I think the only thing here, that doesn't go lost on me is how fortunate we've been as compared to general business during this period, right? If you look outside restaurants or even outside QSR in restaurants, this has been devastating, right? To tons and tons of businesses. I mean, I think they're estimating 35, 40,000 restaurants will close. Forget about retail, and list goes on, right? So we're not naive to the fact that we've been blessed, unbelievably blessed during this. I think for those who are not in that position, the one thing I can tell you every time we've had challenges, and by the way, we thought we were going to go, off the edge of a cliff at the beginning of this, is just that, be proactive, right? We always say internally, good news should never travel faster than bad news. And to me, the faster you're out talking to creditors, banks, partners, vendors, franchisees, I don't care who it is, when times are uncertain, the better. And when things when you wait till it's too long, when you're in too deep, that's where I think things get more challenging. So I would just encourage people to be very, very proactive with all of their communication. You heard Rusty say it earlier, and I think you'll get through it if you're a good partner and you're proactively communicating with people, in challenging times.
What's the most valuable service your franchisor has provided to you? We talked about, better to be a part of what happened. Just give me like a sense if there's something physical that you could point to that would be like, that was a great service.
I think it's no different for a franchisor than it is for franchisee. I think a franchisor's the most important thing they can do is select the greatest franchisees to be a part of their brand. And I think the greatest thing a franchisor can do for a franchisee is make sure they have the greatest individuals working inside their brand. To me, this is a very simple game, right? It all comes back to who has the best talent and the most capability. And I don't care if it's franchisor looking at franchisee or franchisee looking at franchisor. Those brands that have that looking either direction are the ones that typically win, right? And talent wraps up in everything from, authenticity and humility all the way through to just raw capability. But I think it's the same equation whether you're looking across the aisle in either direction.
That's interesting. Rusty, I'd sort of ask you, you may have said it earlier as well in terms of BELFOR's ability to potentially help and move along the other brands, but and that maybe that's the answer, that's the most valuable service. But how would you answer that question in terms of what do you think you provided that had the greatest value to folks in the system?
Well, you know, I think that if I were giving a franchisor any advice, you know, if they're not part of a big organization with really strong financial stability, I think they still need to demonstrate great leadership, and you can't give false enthusiasm, and you can't make promises about things that you don't know. But you know, I don't. You still got to take a positive spin on this as much as realistically possible, and not pile on to the unknown and the abyss, and the end is near. You know, we're still a big, great country, and we will figure this thing out as we already have, and we'll continue to make inroads. And are things going to be different? Are things going to change? Yep. But you know, it's what's that saying? You know, change is cool and growth is optional, and that's how you have to look at this thing. And again, I just think you know, demonstrating strength and enthusiasm and through it is probably the most important thing. I think demonstrating that kind of leadership and attitude is critical.
That's great. Well, I see that we're getting close to the end. You guys have been amazing to donate your time. It's I think it's very grounding for a lot of people to hear, frankly, your voices, your calmness, the way you've approached these things, the way you've approached opportunity and obstacles. It's commendable, and you know, we'll get all the thanks, and we'll try to share some with you. But we'll get texts and emails all night, and you'll see that the library will get constantly toggled and people going back and watching these things, then calling us about them later. But it's a great public service. We are forever in your debt, and we will probably, in all likelihood, since we never really stop asking, is be on you for Springboard or trying to help us bring some perspective to that in September when that comes around. We wish you all great success and your company's great success, and to all the folks listening. Ryan?
Thank you, guys. Rusty, to round it out, the "Going Through Hell, Keep On Going" quote from earlier was from Rodney Atkins' country song. That was stuck in my head as we were talking. But thank you guys both, Michael and Rusty. Appreciate it. And we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you, gentlemen. We appreciate it.
Very much. Thanks. Everybody.
Thanks very much for the opportunity. Thanks.
Bye.